Welcome to Coffee and Crime.
I'm Izzy.
And I'm Colette.
This is our new podcast where we're going to talk about crime, mainly murder, I think, yeah, and hopefully drink coffee. We did have hot chocolate today, but this took us a while to set up, so we've already drank it, but in the future we will.
So I think what our plan is just to have sort of kind of a weekly theme, but not weekly, if that makes sense. So there'll be, say, conspiracies or assassinations or something like that, and then each week will be a different theme, but we'll come back to that theme in a few weeks' time. So today we're going to be starting off with H Holmes. And if you don't know who that is, he's known as America's first serial killer because he was sort of the main person, I guess, like the sort of the first one that's known to have killed the number of people that people nowadays kill, if that makes sense.
And I don't know the story, so Colette's been very excited to tell me all week. She keeps nearly spilling it, but I've made her wait, so I'm going to be finding out for the first time.
So excited to tell you because, to be fair, he's actually not the most interesting. I don't find him that interesting, but the things he did are so horrific that that's what I find interesting. Not because I find that good, obviously. Just a disclaimer, we're in no way trying to support or encourage serial killers.
We just like to talk about it. I mean, we're starting this kind of because Colette always on the train kind of told us stories and it started to interest me as well. And then we started, well, she's been listening to My Favourite Murder for ages.
And like Generation Y and Case File True Crime.
But she introduced me to it. We're trying not to copy it. Yeah, so we kind of thought we'd start one of our own. So begin.
Right, I'm
excited.
Start. Okay, so a little bit of background information. H Holmes is most commonly known as H Holmes, and his nickname was the Beast of Chicago. And I've written a little note here that Chicago seems to be the home of con men because H Holmes began as a con man. He was sort of into insurance fraud schemes and everything like that. Just not a nice guy, basically. And also there's a book called The Devil in the White City, which is written by Eric Larson, and is currently being made into a movie where Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be playing H Holmes, which I'm very excited about because Leonardo DiCaprio is such a good actor, and everyone is saying that they think he's going to get another Oscar for it, which he definitely deserves at this point. So let's hope that that's good, and we might have to go see that together.
Yeah,
although we'll know the whole story now.
Yeah.
So, H Holmes was born on the 16th of May, 1861, so a really long time ago, as Herman Webster Mudgett. I think that must be.
This is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Right, we'll go with it. It's fine.
Okay, I think it's Mudgett. In Gilmanton, New Hampshire, and he came from a wealthy family, although not that much is actually known about his childhood because he used to lie on his tax return forms and his census forms and stuff, so no one actually really knows things about his childhood. And I did read that he said that during his childhood he was abused by a priest.
Ooh.
But that was in his confession, but then in his confession he lied about a lot of things which have been proven. So I'm not saying that he lied about that, but all the other sources I found said that he had sort of the perfect childhood.
Yeah.
So I don't really know. But then I feel like, because I'm sort of a strong believer that serial killers is more nurture than nature most of the time.
Yeah, we have a lot of discussions about that, don't we?
Yeah, so I think something must have happened to him, but when he was a child, he apparently was really, really afraid of death, and especially doctors, and some of his classmates actually forced him to stand in front of a human skeleton in a doctor's office.
Yeah.
Which he actually later said sort of cured him of his fear of death, although I'll come into some things later which make me sort of think that maybe he wasn't actually cured of this.
Yeah, wait, is this another thing from his confession thing that he said?
I'm not actually sure. It didn't really say.
I was just wondering because if he lied about...
I think that is true. I think he did get
Yeah.
sort of bullied about that.
Oh, yeah.
But like a lot of serial killers, he was unusually intelligent. There's no IQ score or anything, because I can't imagine you really had IQ tests back in the 1800s. So we can't be sure exactly how intelligent, but from some of the things he did, and he went to medical school and stuff, so I would assume that he was probably quite intelligent. So he began practicing surgery on animals, which is another thing that's common in quite a few serial killers. They often tend to begin abusing animals or things like that, and surgery isn't quite as bad. And when he was a child, there's some reports, this isn't confirmed, one of his friends died, and it's believed that he was actually responsible for that death, whether it was an accident or murder.
How old was he?
It doesn't say, just
Like
under 16.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
But I'm not sure whether he intended it, but I know that he had sort of some involvement with it, and his friend did definitely die. So even if he had nothing to do with it, I can imagine that at a young age that would be quite harrowing and would sort of mess you up probably for quite a while. Yeah. And then when he was 16, he left school, which is when he changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes, which is obviously where the initials H Holmes comes from, which is like his most famous name out of everything. So then when he was a teenager, he studied medicine in Vermont and then enrolled at the University of Michigan Medical School, which is personally where I believe everything sort of started to go downhill really badly.
Okay.
This is sort of
Did some
where
things happen? Okay.
This is where I think it started going bad. So whilst he was there, he stole cadavers, which, not gonna lie, I literally had no idea what that was.
Okay.
So I had to Google that, which, if you don't know, is the posh word for a corpse, basically. And he stole them from the laboratory, burned and disfigured them before staging them, so burying them or sort of leaving them somewhere to look as though they'd been killed accidentally. And then what he would then do is take life insurance policies out on these people and then plant the bodies, and then when they were discovered, he would then collect the money.
Oh, I see. So it was for money.
Yeah, so a lot of his crimes are motivated by sort of financial gain, which is why I don't find him the most...
Yeah, that's not... Because it's more interesting if they do it for just, like, really fucked up.
Yeah, because they are like that, whereas I don't... Well, I mean, obviously he was messed up in some way, because that isn't generally how people think to make money, but I don't think he was necessarily a psychopath or had any mental...
with those, they were dead already, right?
Yeah, so that isn't... I mean, obviously it's still terrible, but he hasn't actually started killing people.
No, or even hurting them, just...
Yeah, but this is why I think he started to sort of go down that spiral now, because... If you already have that attitude towards sort of dead people, I think he didn't respect them, or I just don't think he had the same attitude towards death, whether that was caused by his friends or classmates bullying him and forcing him to look at dead skeletons or something, I'm not sure. And it was also believed that he would experiment on the bodies sometimes, which I think began his fascination with death. And then in 1878, he married his first wife, Clara, when he was just 19, which nowadays is actually quite young, but I think then, obviously, you had a shorter life expectancy, so that probably isn't as strange as it sounds to me, because I cannot imagine getting married at 19. And they had a son together 2 years later, and then he abandoned both of them.
Oh, wow.
To move to Chicago. He passed his medical exams in 1884, which I didn't understand. I made a little note of this. How did no one realise that all of the cadavers were A, going missing, and B, Holmes was named as the beneficiary on all of their insurance papers?
Yeah.
Did no one find that weird? That all the corpses that they had at this school seemed to be going missing and then turning up, and then he would just somehow have known them well enough to be on their insurance. I don't know, but he graduated, so well done, I guess.
Yeah. He managed it.
And then he began working at a pharmacy in Chicago, which is what people believe to be his first murder, if you don't count the friend that maybe he had some involvement with. So the pharmacy owner where he was working it's basically his boss, passed away of natural causes, I believe, and the pharmacist's wife took over the store, and he managed to convince her to let him buy the store, which is something I've noticed quite a lot. He seems quite charming and quite able to manipulate people a lot, this whole story.
So maybe he was actually not a psychopath, but maybe like a sociopath or something.
Yeah, or had some abilities, I don't know. Which I think...
kind of uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's why I think it'll be really good having Leonardo DiCaprio play him, because I think he'll be able to...
convey that properly.
Yeah, because obviously he is someone that a lot of people find really attractive, but I think he would be really good at playing that role. So after he bought the store off her, she went missing really soon after, and he claimed she moved to California, but it's not known whether this is true, which is why it's his first assumed murder, because there's actually no proof, but she was never seen anywhere else, but she was also never seen dead.
Yeah.
So she's basically a missing person. Yeah, I don't know what happened with that. Hopefully, obviously, he did not murder her, but then I can't see any other reason.
Well, I mean, if he was a murderer and she mysteriously went missing after being... then...
I expect that he did. Yeah. Unfortunately. And his first known, or one of his first known victims, is someone called Julia Smythe. I'm really not sure how to pronounce his name.
Just say it and move on. No one's going to mind.
Who was his mistress. So Julia's husband worked for Holmes at the pharmacy, so Holmes was his boss. And the husband found out about the affair and moved away, leaving Smythe, which is obviously his wife, and their daughter Pearl behind. And both Julia and Pearl disappeared on Christmas Eve, 1891. And Holmes claimed that she died during an abortion, but this was never confirmed. But then I feel like that is potentially quite likely, because obviously illegal abortions were incredibly dangerous, and they still are. That is still a huge problem in the world at the minute. Illegal abortions cause thousands.
Well, and it was a long time ago, so they probably didn't
have the medical...
do very good abortions anyway.
But then I feel like maybe that's true, and then if that's true, maybe he didn't murder the pharmacy owner's wife either, because... I think if he didn't kill one, I don't think he would have killed the second one and not the first one, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this is where it sort of starts to get interesting. So after purchasing the pharmacy...
I've just seen something interesting on your computer. I'm going to move away so that it's spoiler. I'm excited. Right, sorry.
So after he purchased the pharmacy, he bought an empty lot across the road from the pharmacy, which he built a 3-story hotel on, which was known as the Castle. And it was basically, I think this is what I was sort of gathering, it was like a hotel, but kind of more like apartments. So it seemed like somewhere you would maybe rent for like a month, or it was somewhere you would stay for a couple of months, but it wasn't permanent, so it wasn't renting an apartment, but it also was longer than you would stay at a hotel for. Yeah, I see what you mean, So say you had business in Chicago, it would be somewhere you would stay for 6 months, or sort of lodgings is sort of what I was gathering it as. So this is sort of what he is most famous for. A lot of people don't know about some of the sort of things he did on the side. This is his main thing that he's famous for. So the castle was constructed in 1889, which was 2 years after he married his second wife.
Who was his second wife? Oh, are you coming on to this?
Yeah.
I was like, did I miss something? But okay.
Myrta Belknap, despite he was still married to his first wife, and apparently he, a few years after marrying his second wife, he actually did file for divorce, claiming that Clara had committed infidelity, which is his first wife.
Yeah.
But technically he was the one that was doing the infidelity. But yeah, I think that shows clearly how charismatic he was, that somehow he managed to seduce 2 women in a relatively short amount of time whilst constructing the castle, which has later come to be known as the Murder Castle. So
that's what I saw, so right.
Very charismatic. So during construction, he would regularly fire the builders so they wouldn't catch on to his plans, and then construction was completed 2 years later in 1891, which was one of the things that when I was researching this, I found several one of the articles I found said it was built in 1894, but that is the year of the Chicago Fair, which is the main sort of murder spree.
Oh, was it just like conflicting?
Yeah,
info?
but most of it said 1891, so I believe
go with
that's
that.
when
It doesn't matter too much. Anyway.
I think because it's just such an old thing, and he lied on so many of his insurance.
No,
forms.
and I mean, but for anyone, it's really hard to find like exact things. Like when I was researching mine, there's just so much like different information that you really have to check like a lot of things. But anyway, carry on.
So just a little description of this castle. So the upstairs, which is probably the most normal area, I would say, contained living quarters and small rooms, which is where he would torture and kill the victims. And blueprints for the castle included 51 doorways opening to brick walls, 100 windowless rooms, stairs leading to nowhere, 2 furnaces, and body-sized chutes leading to an incinerator in the basement.
What?
Yeah. I don't understand
That's so freaky.
Yeah. I don't understand where he got all the money to pay for this either, because I'm guessing that pharmacy job.
You said like the stairs, which go nowhere.
Yeah.
Is that just to mess you up, so you got all freaked out, or just for fun? Like what?
I'm not really sure. I mean, in my head, I was picturing like sort of Hogwarts, you know, when all the stairs move around.
Yeah.
But obviously, not at all like Hogwarts, because that was supposed to be fun, and the murder castle is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But I sort of made a note here because I don't understand how the builders did not realise that, because I know that he fired them before they sort of started getting suspicious, but...
Nah, but he had to tell them, like, to make all this stuff, like...
A windowless room, wouldn't you think, while you were building it, this is strange. It's fair enough.
Because someone's got to complete each thing, if you know what I mean.
That's
so
what I mean.
Got to see the finished
Or someone
product.
has to make the chute, or someone has to build the
I
furnace
guess they just
underneath the chute.
Wanted their money, no questions asked, or whatever. I mean... Anyway, I want to know what happened,
So after it finished construction, he placed job ads. This is my favourite thing. Asking for a wife, which...
Okay, I thought he had a wife.
Yeah, he had 2 wives.
He had 2 wives?
So
he wants another one to add to his collection.
He's pretty greedy. I mean, leave some for the rest of the people in Chicago. And also he was specifically asking for female workers, which is another thing that is a red flag. If your boss is only hiring female workers...
Well, it was the 1800s.
True, actually.
They probably weren't that concerned about it.
Okay, well now if that is what your boss is doing, then please...
be worried.
Yeah. Unless obviously you're in a career where that's... Like if you're a female modelling agency and they're only hiring...
I think we're digressing unnecessarily.
So... He also advertised the castle as a hotel-type establishment, which is what I was saying earlier, is I think it was like hotel, but more permanent than a hotel.
Well,
so you would... Basically, this is why I think a lot of people didn't actually realise what he was doing there for a long time, is because people had intended to stay there a long time. It's not like someone was going for a weekend in Chicago.
And then they just never came back. They were actually staying for a long time.
They were staying for like 6 months, and then when they didn't come back, you might think like, oh, maybe they got offered a full-time job, especially, obviously, they didn't have phones then.
Yeah.
You had to send letters. So you might think, oh, maybe they decided to stay there and just didn't send a letter. Or I think it was less weird than it would be, obviously, now, if you hadn't seen your friend in 6 months.
Yeah.
And they were going somewhere, you might not think anything of it. So he was placing ads looking for a wife, presenting himself as a wealthy man, which I think he was fairly wealthy. If mean,
to build this murder castle, like, you gotta have some
funds in the bank, which I think he
Unless he spent it all on the murder castle.
I know, but I think this is where the money he got from the insurance.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. That makes sense. Sorry, I'm messing with this thing.
Okay. But yeah, so from when he was at university, from those insurance schemes, I think this
saved it all.
Yeah, maybe that was his plan all along. Maybe when he was doing that, that's why he wasn't murdering people, because he had this plan that he would save it up.
Murder extravaganza.
Yeah, treat himself.
Yeah.
So many of the people he knew disappeared, which again, this is what I find difficult, is there's actually no proof whether they went missing because no bodies were found, but also no alive people were.
He had an incinerator.
Yeah.
So, you know, and also because of the time, like you said, with no phones and everything, like, and all that kind of thing, like, it's harder to find people.
Yeah, but if there is a missing person, they might not technically be missing, they just might have moved out of Chicago. So,
well, yeah,
I imagine a lot of people sort of said, oh, my friend went into this castle and never came back. I imagine could be people that just moved to another state and just didn't tell anyone, or...
Although a lot of them would probably want to eventually get back in touch with family members.
True.
But yeah, anyway.
All of his employees, this is one of the things I find really weird as well, if your boss is doing this, please quit your job. His employees were required to have life insurance policies, which isn't that weird, I feel like that's fine.
Yeah.
But he paid for them, which again, I guess... I know in America, obviously, you can have people, some sort of companies will pay for your health insurance, but I feel like your life insurance is a bit different. But he would pay for them,
about this stuff, but yeah.
provided he was the beneficiary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So basically...
So that's a bit of a red flag. Like...
Yeah. So basically, by signing up to this place, you're basically signing your life away because...
Although, it's really hard to know what was, like, normal at this time, isn't
I
it?
know.
Because, like, maybe that was fine. And you just think, wow, how generous. That means, like...
Oh, yeah, true, that if I die, my family will... Oh, wait, no. My family won't benefit.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, if I die, my boss will benefit. That is... Yeah.
You don't get anything out of it, do you? Right.
No,
maybe,
you just know that...
Maybe he said he would give some of it back to the family. I have no idea.
I don't
Invest
know.
it back in those guys.
But I think this is, like, another thing that he was clearly so charming that he could just... sort of do whatever he wanted.
That's dodgy though.
Yeah.
Dodgy, yes.
And one of the people that actually disappeared working under him was Emmeline Segrand, who began working in May 1982 and went missing, and she disappeared in December. And another woman called Edna Van Tassel also went missing, but then again, like we've said before, I don't know if they just went missing or if he did something.
Yeah.
But I suspect he probably... did
yeah.
something because he built this place with the intention of murdering people.
I mean, yeah, there was a clear intention.
Yeah, so I suspect that unfortunately they were probably murdered. So his main murder spree began in 1893 at the Chicago Fair. So Chicago got to host the World Fair, which apparently was a thing. I don't think that exists anymore, but
what was that?
It celebrated the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America, which Columbus obviously did not discover America. We are aware of this. Yeah.
Right.
Because there were people living there already. No. So basically, it was a celebration celebrating white men going to other countries and just invading, which is...
Are we going into this now?
No, I will try and avoid this, but I don't know, it just seems like a weird thing for a fair.
Now,
I know. And it lasted from May to October, so clearly it was a massive deal. Everyone loves Columbus. Yeah, that is...
Maybe they just liked the fair. Maybe it was fun.
Maybe, I hope that's what it was. So his hotel, or the castle, was quite close to the fair, but far enough away that you wouldn't be sort of kept awake and you wouldn't be right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But it was close enough that you could walk, so it was basically the ideal sort of place to stay while you were visiting this fair. So a lot of people from around the world actually came to this fair and then would stay at his hotel, which is what I was saying about how people stayed there a long time. Obviously May to October is quite a while, so I think people tended to stay there for a few months.
Yeah.
So it's less weird. If someone went missing, you wouldn't necessarily think of that.
Yeah, true.
So the way he would kill people, which
we're getting right into it. Okay.
Yeah, just a disclaimer that, I mean, this isn't super graphic. I didn't include really graphic details, but just if you don't like this sort of thing, just skip ahead a minute or two.
Do you know more graphic details?
No, I actually sort of tried to avoid. I didn't want to scar myself.
I think I like the graphic details sometimes. Like morbid curiosity, like...
It depends. I have like the details of how he would kill them, but not like not graphic details. But
Okay.
so some of the rooms were soundproof, which I'm surprised you could even do that in the 1800s. But anyway, and contained gas lines, which allowed him to gas guests when he wanted. So if he was just bored one day or sat in his office and he was like, you know what, today has been a really dull day at work.
Let's mix it up a bit.
Yeah.
Wait, but what did he do with the bodies? If he gassed a whole room of people?
Just
am I
getting,
okay?
Yeah, you got wait.
Sorry.
Oh, it gets worse. So basically, that's what the human-sized chutes were for.
Yeah.
Like, inside the walls.
Was it all interconnected then with these chutes, or did he have to drag them over?
I don't actually know.
Because that's what I was thinking, because you can't exactly say, like, oh, staff, come over here, got a job for you. Can you haul these down to the chute?
Yeah, true, I don't.
And then there'd be people around, so...
Well, but that seems ridiculous if you had one in each room. Maybe he had them in specific rooms, and then when he met guests, if he was like, you know what, I don't like you, he would put them in those rooms. Maybe some rooms were normal.
Yeah. Just because someone might see you if you've got...
Yeah, if you're dragging them down the corridor, definitely.
Yeah.
So in the basement, which I think is where the chutes led to, or I know that's where some of them led to at least.
Wait, so as in the incinerator chutes or like separate chutes?
No,
for, like...
the incinerator chutes. The incinerators in the basement.
Yeah. But there's not other
they
separate chutes.
They don't all lead to the incinerator.
Oh.
I don't think they went straight in the incinerator. I think they led to the basement. Then he put them in the incinerator. That's what I thought.
Right.
I don't really know how incinerators work.
Yeah, okay.
There was a couple of things when I was like researching this, like chemicals and stuff, that I didn't actually know what they were, so I had to Google them, and then I was like, oh god, what if someone sees my computer search history? And I've been looking up all these weird drugs. So in the basement he had a dissecting table. This is my least, this I cannot. Stretching rack, which is like what you put animals on, which again...
Who puts animals on that?
That's what a stretching rack's for, isn't it?
No, stretching rack's what they used to use ages ago, when they just used to...
I thought stretching racks were what you dried leather on, where you stretch out the cow skin.
Might be, but it's like, they used to do that, they have that on those, like, you know, when you look at the old torture things, where they like, I'm sure it's that, where they like stretch them to the...
like hand drawn and quartered. That? No? Is that not what
I don't know. I don't think so. No, but you know where they like tighten it till your like limbs pop up.
Well, because Ed Gein...
Is that part of that?
He had a stretching rack, and I swear it said it was for leather.
Oh, look this up while you speak. Oh, I can't, because my Wi-Fi's gone from your house.
Okay, well, sorry. So yeah, he had a stretching rack, and he had a crematory, basically an incinerator. And then after stretching them, he would sell the human skeletons to medical schools, which I think is slightly ironic, given that he used to go to medical school.
Yeah.
And he would have, like, cadavers that people had sold to the school that he would steal. I find it a bit ironic that then he was basically the person that was then on the selling end of that.
Yeah. So, I did look up this stretching rack.
It's not
and
used for leather.
It's gross. No, I don't know, but this is one on Wikipedia from the Tower of London, and it just says for, like, a victim or whatever, and then it says... You use a handle and ratchet mechanism to increase the tension on the chains.
Okay, and that's enough of that.
Yeah. There's some, there's some details on here.
That's not.
Ew. Yeah, if you want to look this up for some, look on the second paragraph of this rack brackets torture Wikipedia article. It goes further. Yeah, no. Right, carrying on, because that's just disgusting. Yeah.
Yeah, so he sold the skeletons to medical schools, which... Also, another thing, obviously medical school is teaching you how to save lives, or, like, that is the main purpose of them, and he was selling human skeletons from people that he had murdered.
Hello.
So clearly there was not many, like, health or checks that people used to do to check that.
Was it for, like, dissection and everything?
Yeah. But apparently he used to charge between $5 to $10, which now it's like $100-ish.
Wow, that's a bargain, though.
What, if you're buying it, or do you mean
buying it?
$100
for a corpse? Is it a bargain?
I
think that's a bargain.
don't know. I can't say I have much experience. I guess you could just find some in the road or something.
What? people, dead bodies. What are you talking about?
No.
Yeah, but then they've got to do it properly.
Yeah.
So they can't just go digging people up. Oh, I don't know.
Anyway. So he would usually cremate if he didn't, sell them to the medical school, because I guess he couldn't be bothered to dissect and stretch them that day.
Oh, yeah. He
would cremate them or put them in pits of acid. And it did actually have the name of the acid, so if you're interested, I think it was on, I think I saw it on a website called Crime Museum, so if you're interested in that, but there was no way I was going to be able to pronounce that, so I just wrote acid instead.
Okay.
And it was sort of around this time he met a fellow con man called Benjamin Peitzel, which is how I've just decided I'm going to say his name.
Yeah, just roll with it, whatever your instinct is. Because always.
On one of the websites, it was spelled Pietzel, but then I googled it and that was wrong. So this is why it was really hard researching it, because it's so old that there's quite a few incorrect details. But he worked with Benjamin Peitzel to help him rent an apartment. So basically, Benjamin Peitzel was sort of a con man, but I think he sort of pretended to be a lawyer type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Benjamin Peitzel helped Holmes rent an apartment with his wife, so not his actual wife, someone pretending to be his wife, which was his girlfriend, who was an aspiring actress called Minnie Williams. And they rented this apartment in 1893, which, again, I don't understand why they needed an apartment given they had a humongous hotel that they could have stayed in. And then in July of the same year, so that's 1893, Minnie's sister visited, and neither woman was ever seen again after the 5th of July, 1893. So the day after Independence Day.
I was thinking, isn't that the 4th of July?
Yeah,
so it's the day after.
It is the day after. Which I think, in a way, makes it even worse. Not that... I don't know, it just seems weird.
Murdering on a holiday.
Yeah,
just,
I mean, yeah,
he extra harsh. Like, just...
Yeah, well, it wasn't a holiday, it's the day after a holiday.
Well,
but
close to a holiday.
So clearly, he at least had some good morals, because, you know, he waited.
He waited one
How
day.
How nice of him.
What a lovely guy.
I know. So then he left Chicago after the fair ended, so that was in October of 1893, because Chicago was going through a bit of a rough patch and the economy was really bad. So basically he'd stopped earning money, which, as we already know, he was all about that financial gain, so he left. And he began focusing on insurance schemes, which was what he was doing anyway, but more.
Yeah.
So it's actually not known how many people he murdered at this murder castle. But I'm going to sort of go over that at the end, because there's a lot of figures that he said in his confession, and then that doesn't add up with what actually it was and things like that. So anyway, after he left Chicago, he sort of travelled around America for a while, and he stole horses, which seems like a really bizarre thing to me. How do you even steal a horse? From Texas, and sold them in St. Louis.
What do you mean, how do you steal a horse?
No, but I don't understand how you steal it and ship it. Well, I do, obviously. I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
Just get on it and ride away. What?
But surely there's easier things to steal that you could probably get more money for.
Yeah, but if people, like, tie them up and then just...
Yeah, but still, it's still a live animal. Wouldn't you just steal some jewellery or something? But he sold them in St... I should have looked up how you say this. It's either St. Louis or St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And not at the time, but like quite a few years later, he was actually arrested. That is what he was arrested for.
Okay.
Which I find actually quite amusing, that he was this massive
serial killer.
And he was arrested for stealing horses. So he was imprisoned for stealing these horses, and while he was in prison, he met someone called Marion Hedgepeth, who was actually his cellmate, and they devised an insurance scam. So basically what would happen was Holmes would take out an insurance policy of $10,000, which is probably worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions now.
Well, yeah.
That is a lot of money against himself. So he would take out his own insurance policy on himself, fake his death, and then pay Hedgepeth $500 for a lawyer if anything went wrong. So basically, if he went to court for like the murder of Holmes or something.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And they did it once Holmes got let out of prison, but the insurance company refused to pay out as they were suspicious. probably because Holmes had been taking out so many insurance payments.
And he was just generally a scammer and had been to jail and everything.
Yeah, they were probably like, you know what, this guy has had a lot of money from us over the years from insurance scams. You know what, I think this is weird. So he didn't pay Hedgepeth, which later came back to bite him.
Oh.
So, murder of Benjamin Peitzel, who, I don't know if you remember from earlier, was his business partner who helped him rent that apartment that he murdered the 2 women in.
Yeah.
So, their plan was that Peitzel would fake his own death as part of a similar scheme, which there is a lot of similarities. They were going to scam an insurance company out of $10,000, which is obviously the same amount as before. But this time, Holmes, for some reason, was planning on giving the money to Peitzel's wife, so maybe he was feeling generous, or I don't really know, because before he never seemed to do that. The fact that he was the beneficiary for his employees, clearly that wasn't something he was bothered about, other people, or I don't know what was going through his head. But Peitzel was going to pretend to be an inventor who was killed in a lab explosion.
Oh, okay, yeah, elaborate.
Yeah, but
okay.
Holmes, being the crazy person that he is, actually killed him.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On purpose, like?
Yeah, intentionally, because he was like, you know what? The insurance scam didn't work last time. I don't want to risk this again. So I will
how to be extra safe,
Yeah, I will kill him and make sure that I get this insurance money, because that was all he cared about. So he knocked him unconscious using chloroform and then set his body alight, which I don't really see how that looks like that was a lab explosion other than setting his body alight. But when he... this is why it's ridiculous. When he later confessed in a confession, he tried to convince...
you
know what I mean?
Yeah.
He tried to convince authorities that Peitzel had already died before being set alight. However, the medical evidence that was shown at Holmes's trial showed that the chloroform was used after Peitzel's death. So basically he burnt him alive and then used chloroform to make it look like a suicide. How that would look like a suicide... I guess what he was trying to make it look like was that Benjamin had knocked himself unconscious and then...
But then how would he have set himself on fire?
I guess you set the room alight.
Start the fire first? And then just knock yourself out so you're not bothered by it?
Yeah, I guess.
Bit of a weird way.
Yeah, I feel like Holmes was not really thinking...
No.
But then I guess if he'd convinced Benjamin that was how they were going to do it, then that would be the only way that he actually would have been able to murder him, because otherwise Peitzel would have been a bit suspicious.
Yeah.
So Peitzel's body was...
I see, yeah. That's making sense.
Peitzel's body was discovered on the 4th of September 1894 when a policeman forced the door open because one of the neighbours thought it was weird that the door was like ajar, or I don't know, the neighbour was suspicious. So he got a policeman, and the policeman forced the door open, and they discovered a man who, at the time, obviously they didn't know it was Benjamin, because he had a disfigured face and a disfigured left arm, and he was close to a pipe, which I wasn't sure if that meant a metal pipe or a pipe as in a cigarette. Yeah, I'm assuming a smoking pipe, because it seems if it's...
Really? I don't know. I mean, does it have relevance?
No.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if this is leading to something.
Close to a pipe, matches, and a bottle of inflammable liquid, and the coroner believed that he had been dead 3 days, but it's not actually known what day that he did kill him, so he could have...
Yeah.
I mean, I read in the article that he hadn't been dead that long, because I can't remember what it's called, but something mortis. When you die, your bodies become really stiff.
Oh, yeah.
And that was actually kind of how they caught him, because I think it's like rigor mortis.
I've heard that.
They thought it was weird that Benjamin's body was in a specific position, and they actually asked Holmes, how did you learn how to avoid rigor mortis? And he just didn't have an answer, because he hadn't pre-prepared for it, because he didn't think they would ask that. So that was sort of, that wasn't how he was caught, but that was used in his trial later. So Peitzel was kept in the morgue for 10 days, and then they received a letter from the insurance company. So presumably, this was kind of confused me, but I'm assuming that Holmes must have sort of got fed up of waiting for Peitzel to be recognised, because he hadn't been recognised yet. So he wasn't getting the
Speeding up
insurance.
the process, yeah.
So I imagine he contacted the insurance company and sort of said Heitzel's died. Basically, is what I was sort of gathering had happened.
Oh, that's no patience. Just
I know.
give it some
Wait a
time.
while.
You're gonna get yourself caught.
Which he did.
Which he did.
So the morgue received a letter from the insurance company which identified him as Benjamin Peitzel, as well because as an inventor he had used a fake name.
Yeah.
But on the insurance scheme he'd used his actual name.
Yeah.
So although to the authorities he was known as someone else.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Holmes went to the morgue with Peitzel's 14-year-old daughter, whose name was Alice.
Oh.
Yep, and identified the body, and he claimed the insurance money on behalf of Peitzel's wife. So although Peitzel's wife was named as the beneficiary, Holmes was so charismatic that apparently he could even convince...
Wait, but I thought he was supposed to be the beneficiary for their little scam.
No,
So did they not...
he was supposed to be for the Hedgepeth guy, which was his cellmate.
Yeah, but he didn't...
But for Peitzel, he was...
Oh my gosh, yeah.
his,
Sorry, my bad. Yeah.
Wife was, because... yeah. So he went instead of her and identified Peitzel as being Peitzel. And then he managed to gain custody, this is a bit that I really hate, of 3 of Peitzel's children, including the 14-year-old Alice.
My God.
And
that's so unsettling.
Yeah. And travelled across America with Peitzel's wife.
Oh my God. He just went and stole his family and his money. Great.
But because she believed that it was an insurance scam. So I guess he must have given her the money. I'm assuming that must be what... Yeah. Because she actually believed it was an insurance scam, and he actually... The reason they were travelling across America is because they were looking for him, which must...
So, as in, she thought it had been an insurance scam, but then her husband had just kind of run off.
Yeah, because he was hiding, because he'd...
Oh, for the...
Yeah, because obviously you can't just walk back into town,
streets,
Which I think must be why Holmes went to identify the body, because obviously if she went... She would realise. But then why didn't the 14-year-old... Yeah, I don't know why...
Probably like... I don't know. Maybe he was like, don't look at the body because you're 14.
Yeah, or I just think he was a bit controlling anyway. Yeah. So they travelled across America looking for her dead husband that she didn't know was dead. She believed it had been a scam and that he was hiding in London. Which London is quite significant because there's sort of a conspiracy a bit later that I'll be talking about.
You did spoil this one for me, so I know what you're going to say for that.
He later confessed in his confession that he wrote everything down in to murdering Alice and Nellie, which were Peitzel's children, by basically he put a hole in a trunk. I don't know if it's a trunk of a car.
Wait, sorry, but these like... was one of them the 14-year-old?
Yeah,
Alice, yeah.
I couldn't work out if it meant... Oh, wait, would they have even had cars then? No.
No.
Not really, no. So it must be a trunk as in a
tree
suitcase?
Trunk? Oh.
No, not a tree trunk.
I didn't know if that was where you were going with it.
No,
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, one of the big...
A suitcase, that people had in it. Oh, what is wrong with you?
I'm so sorry.
So, he put them in a trunk while they were in Toronto. So they actually even left the United States to look for...
Just now when you carry on, that just seems even more dumb. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Right.
So they were in Toronto, so he'd convinced her that her husband was there. Basically, they travelled really far.
Yeah.
And he shut them in the trunk, and then I think he either put a hole in it or put a pipe in it, and then poured gas in.
Ew, what the fuck?
Yeah, and they died.
Oh no.
And he buried them in the cellar of his rental house.
Oh my God, that's... Ugh.
I actually read there was sort of the police report of when they found it, and I was going to include it. It was just too horrible. Like, the guy said that basically they'd been digging for quite a while. They were really deep, like 10 feet under.
Oh, yeah.
And then they found like an arm bone of one of them, and it was too horrible. So sad, I didn't want to include it. And then Hedgepeth, his former cellmate, comes back, which I kind of low-key love Hedgepeth because even though he was a criminal because he was in
Yeah.
prison at the same time
And he
as
was
Hope.
he was in on this scam. But
But he didn't do this. Well, he would have been if it had worked.
Yeah, but he was supposed to be.
Yeah, but
Scamming.
anyway, he seems a bit better than Holmes. Well, actually,
he
a
does
hell of a
seem
lot
like,
better
yeah.
than Holmes. So,
Well, what was he in prison for though?
I'm not sure. It
So
didn't
you never
say-
know.
Yeah, true. Maybe he was doing something similar across the block, which is why the economy was bad because there were too many murder castles trying to compete.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, circling back to that murder castle, he just went ahead and abandoned
I know
this castle.
Yeah, this massively
after, like,
expensive.
Yeah, this crazy old thing, which he spent so much money and clearly like time on and effort.
And loads of builders knew about.
Was it just like not good enough? And did
Well,
he
it's
like
because
sell
the
it?
economy was really bad. So I don't.
Oh,
It
yeah,
didn't actually.
true.
Say
I know,
he
but still,
sold it.
come on, like that was a lot of effort.
Not a very good
Just-
businessman. But Hedgepeth informed the police that Holmes had tried to commit insurance fraud,
Yeah,
but the police didn't have any evidence of it other than Hedgepeth, which obviously he was in prison, so he's not the most reliable
yeah.
witness.
Yeah.
So they couldn't use that as evidence, but they had the evidence about the stolen horse from Texas, which is
Wow.
incredible.
Nice.
Yeah. This is another thing that I think why he wasn't cured of his fear of death, which was when he was a child. He had a
Mhm.
fear of death, which apparently he was cured from, shown by the fact that obviously he murdered people. But I don't think he was cured because he was terrified of Texan punishment, which, to be honest, I would also be.
What was it?
Well, they still, I mean, I know a lot of states still do, but they still have the death penalty.
Yeah, but then was it like crazy death penalty or just like?
I'm not really sure,
Or, like,
but
you
for
know,
some
like,
reason,
by
he was-
but I mean like way of killing.
maybe. But I feel like the fact that he was afraid of it, given the way
Yeah.
he was killing people, there must have been something
Yeah.
traumatic about it. So he was afraid of the Texan punishment, so he confessed about the insurance scam. I guess so that
Mhm.
it would be in the state that he was in at the
Oh
time.
yeah.
But not the murder of Peitzel. So basically because the stolen horse was in Texas, but the insurance scam happened in Chicago. So if he
Yeah.
confessed to the insurance scam, he would be punished in Chicago, not Texas.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So he didn't confess to the murder, just the insurance scam. And then in this time, somehow he had managed to seduce a third woman as he married Georgiana Yoke on January the 17th, 1894 in Denver, Colorado, after he was arrested for insurance fraud. So maybe must have been so
Yeah.
charismatic. I can't imagine still wanting to marry someone after they'd committed insurance fraud. So he must have been so...
Yeah, but maybe she really liked him and
Yeah, he
didn't
also
care.
still had
'Cause-
two
but
wives.
she didn't know that he killed people, so I guess that might not have been a problem for her. The
But
scamming.
it doesn't actually say what happened to his second wife. Maybe he just
Or it
abandoned
her
Yeah,
again, because no mention of her.
I
is
know.
there?
She just sort of stopped.
He was going with a new family then, and now he's got his
Yeah.
new wife. So
And he had the woman that he killed, supposedly killed, the aspiring actress who he pretended was his wife in order to run that apartment. But he was arrested on the 17th of November, 1894 in Boston. And he was arrested for the charge of stealing the horse in Texas.
yeah,
Which was, I assume, when he then confessed the insurance fraud to avoid going to Texas. And they then began to investigate the castle, the police, that is, in 1895, but this is what annoys me. They never found any evidence to convict him with. So he got away
Wow.
with everything he did there.
but it is a huge castle with clearly multiple methods for killing people.
Yeah, but you can't... He could just pretend that, I don't know, he didn't know it was there.
He
That's
built
it,
it.
yeah.
What? he
I-
designed it. Just go to the builders. They've got the. records? Like, what?
I don't know.
Like, what else was he... What would he... Like, what were you using this castle for? It was just... You can't just say that's just a hotel
but you
thing.
could say, oh, that's how I hunt animal. I don't know.
Stairways leading nowhere.
I don't know. I don't know.
I know.
He must have been so charismatic that he could just...
Yeah, maybe they just didn't care enough, like...
Maybe.
About the true situation. Anyway.
Yeah, but he went on trial for Benjamin Pitezel's murder. This is slightly... makes me feel a bit better. In October 1895, was convicted and sentenced to death, which...
Wow. But you don't like the death penalty.
No, I don't like the death penalty.
But do you care in this case? Is the question.
I don't know. I can't.
I know.
I find it difficult because obviously he's a terrible, terrible person.
See, I don't like it that much either. But then there's like things like this where I'm like, like.
Yeah, we don't really
care that much.
Yeah. So this is the bit that was. So this is how many people he killed, kind of. So he confessed to killing his medical school classmate, Dr. Robert Leacock, in 1886 for insurance money. But Robert Leacock actually died in 1889 of natural causes.
Oh, okay.
Which is, so many of his confessions are so conflicting. And he confessed to 27 murders, although some of the people he claimed he killed were actually still alive at the time of his confession. So I don't know how
that's
he...
weird.
Also, why would you confess to something that...
Yeah.
But then I guess he didn't know they were still alive. But he knew he hadn't killed them, so... Anyway.
Who knows?
He confessed to 6 attempted murders, and his confession actually wasn't the police, it was Hearst newspaper paid him $7,500, which is $221,000 of today's money. Oh wait, so maybe that 10,000 insurance was not $1 million. That would have been like 300,000, but still a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they paid him for his confession, but most of his confession is lies. But can you imagine being the editor of that newspaper? You'd be so annoyed. You've paid someone so much money for...
But I mean, they still got a good article. True. They didn't know it was fake, did they, at the time? They got to print it and get all the, like... You know, that might be why he added so much fake stuff, to get a better amount of money for a better story or something.
Yeah.
So he did like that money, like, we do know this.
Only 9 of those 27 that he confessed to have actually been confirmed. So it's only confirmed that he killed 9 people, but it's commonly believed that he killed over 200.
Wow, yeah.
Which is why he is one of, or probably the most prolific serial killer in the world. Unless you count mass bombers, which that's not, I don't find that interesting at all. I just...
Great.
Yeah.
No,
I just find it too...
It's just too grim.
Yeah, and it's just... I mean, not that any killing is necessary. It's just not... It's just massacring hundreds of people. I find it...
It's interesting to think, like, why they did it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, having some... So, like, he had, like, financial motivation, and then there's, like, oh, well, was he abused as a child or something, and is that... But then mass bombing is just...
I find it too similar to sort of... Not on the same scale, but too similar to Hitler, almost. That sort of same...
It's, like, more impersonal.
Yeah, it's just wiping out loads of... just for no reason, really. I mean, obviously, it's not a good reason that people...
Perceived reason,
but
not...
So originally he claimed, or he tried to claim innocence to not get the death penalty, but then he also said he had been possessed by Satan.
Wow, he's really trying it.
I know. I feel like once you've tried to claim your innocence, you then can't claim that you were possessed by Satan, because I feel like, you know... And he actually said that whilst he was in prison, he began to resemble the devil.
Well, he said that himself?
Yeah. I think he seems kind of arrogant. If you think you were possessed by Satan, not even possessed by the devil, but possessed by, like, the best...
The best one! The number one devil.
No,
if you said, like, a demon...
Yeah, yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But saying that you were possessed by Satan... that you
well, no, because Satan can... probably possess a lot of people.
Yeah, but I just mean that clearly
Yeah.
he seems quite arrogant. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get what you mean.
And he was hanged at Moyamensing Prison on the 7th of May, 1896.
Yeah.
Which apparently he was actually very calm for, which kind of goes with the fact that he was over his fear of death.
Oh, yeah, of course, because if he was so terrified, then...
Yeah, then he... But then this is a bit I find strange. His only request, which was actually granted, was that his coffin would be buried in cement 10 feet underground because he was concerned about his body being stolen by grave robbers and used for dissection.
Wasn't that concerned for anyone else?
I know, that's what I don't like.
Ew, yeah.
Yeah, and when they sort of did I don't know how you hang people, but the trap, when that was released, his neck didn't snap, which is how hangings are supposed to go.
Yeah.
And basically he strangled, and it took 20 minutes for him to be pronounced dead.
Oh my god,
Which
that's
I
horrible.
really don't like, because, I mean, I don't agree with the death penalty anyway, but I feel like that's awful. If you're going to do it, it has to be quick. You can't make it painful. I feel like that's just...
Yeah, although...
Yeah, he's a bit...
No, it's just like, it's so horrible, but...
Yeah.
That's what I think. I don't know how I feel about it, rather than the actual death penalty. Well, that as well, but he was not giving a shit about anyone else
Yeah.
and their pain. So I don't know whether he deserves it back, but then that's just kind of ew.
I know. But this is annoying. Hedgepeth, who was
Oh,
not
yeah.
my fave, but one of my faves in the
In
story.
the story, yeah.
Yeah. Was shot and killed at a Chicago saloon
Oh.
during a hold-up on New Year's Eve in 1909, which was actually more recent than... I feel like past the 1900s seems more recent to me than like the 1800s,
Yeah, definitely.
obviously, because it is more recent, but it just feels...
A lot more, yeah.
One of the former caretakers at the hotel
Oh, yeah.
is believed to have been murdered, or he had been believed to have been murdered at the hotel, but he actually committed suicide by taking strychnine, which is a highly toxic chemical, which was one of the things I had to Google.
Yeah.
But he left a note that just said, "I can't sleep." That was all it said. That was his...
Oh, that's so creepy. Just nothing else.
Yeah, no. Yeah, but they thought he'd been murdered, but he committed suicide.
But do you think it was from the stuff that was going on there?
Apparently he had hallucinations.
Oh, right.
And
I was thinking...
he was going... But then whether he had the hallucinations, whether he saw something in it.
No, because I was just thinking the way it says, like, I can't sleep. Like, maybe he'd seen some, like, really awful stuff that was going on.
Yeah,
something.
maybe his hallucinations
knew.
weren't hallucinations. Maybe he did actually know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what his wife said it was.
Oh, yeah.
In August 1895, a fire consumed the castle, and 2 men were seen entering the building, and a gas can was found underneath the back steps. So I personally think that it was arson, which is what a lot of people believe.
Yeah.
The castle survived.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, but it was torn down in 1938, but it had actually been used as like a hotel.
What, did they shut everything off then, all the freaky stuff?
No, because the fire gutted it from the inside.
Oh,
So
but
they
then they've
rebuilt the inside, but the
underneath
actual
it, yeah.
building stayed the same. But I find that a bit... I don't like that.
No, that would freak me out.
So I just sort of got to give credit where credit's due. So a lot of the information I found was from Crime Museum, Wikipedia, biography.com, and then the story of Benjamin Pitezel was found on Harper's Magazine. And then the final part of mine is the conspiracy. So I think it was last year or the year before, a series aired on the History Channel in 8 parts, which was called American Ripper.
Yes. Oh, I need to lie down. Sorry, my arm's breaking.
Which was investigating the possibility that he had not actually died in his execution. So it was hosted by Holmes's great-great-grandson, Jeff Mudgett. So he clearly didn't keep the surname Holmes, because why would you?
Wouldn't be associated with
Yeah,
that.
so they went back to the original surname, and it investigated whether he had actually been hanged and buried at Yeadon Cemetery. It aimed to address a conspiracy that Holmes was also Jack the Ripper, which is...
That sounds so far-fetched.
Yeah, I thought it would be actually really interesting, but I just found it too disbelievable.
Yeah.
But
they're like two whole like big stories. I just don't.
yeah.
Also, he'd gone through that much stuff. You know what I mean? Like, does he want to go and start it all again?
And as well, I feel like obviously Jack the Ripper is Britain's
Yeah.
most prolific serial killer. I don't understand how one person could be both Britain and America's. I mean, obviously, clearly he was capable, but anyway.
Yeah.
So it was basically thought that he could have escaped his execution and moved to London, where he began another killing spree, this time as Jack the Ripper.
But wouldn't there be some sort of like record that he didn't actually die, or they just?
Yeah, no. This is what. So someone definitely died, but the.
Oh, okay.
But so Jeff Mudgett, which is the great-great-grandson, believed it to be true, actually, because he inherited 2 diaries from his grandfather, which were analysed and proven to be written by Holmes. So a handwriting specialist compared the handwriting of Holmes's letters with these diaries, and it matched.
Ooh,
yeah, which I find
interesting.
quite, not compelling, but...
No, but that's...
Yeah. There are details of Holmes's murders, which was also in these diaries a childhood rape by a priest.
Oh, okay.
That's where it came from. And his escape from execution by hiring someone to replace him.
What? Who's gonna do that? Who's gonna replace him? Oh, I'll give you some money if you replace me to die. What? Unless he wanted to give his family some money or something.
True,
What?
yeah. People are strange, I don't know. And apparently also in these diaries he details training sessions, which I think is a horrible description of what it actually was, with his assistant in London, who would commit the Jack the Ripper murders in order to harvest the ovaries, which, if you don't know much about Jack the Ripper, he harvested organs.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought I knew.
Particularly, well, because he murdered women, he harvested the ovaries of women, which... Basically, it's believed that Holmes's assistant would actually go out and kill the women and take their ovaries.
But didn't they find like the evidence?
What do you mean? Who Jack the Ripper is?
Yeah,
I think so. But then,
or was that actually confirmed?
No, basically, that will have to be a whole episode on its own. There's so much about that. But basically, apparently, Holmes believed he could make the ovaries into a youth serum. Which I'm very glad that was not successful, because he's a terrible person. So Jeff Mudgett addressed the fact that their murder styles were completely different.
Yeah.
With Holmes's being a lot more sadistic. Well, I mean, they're both pretty horrible, but they
are different, though.
Yeah, but he believed it was to throw people off the scent, which
yeah, but I feel like if you have your style...
You tend to stick to it.
And also, if they all think that he's dead anyway, then why would he need to mix it up?
Yeah.
And he's in a different country.
Yeah. All of this was detailed in Jeff Mudgett's book, Bloodstains, which I personally haven't read, but a lot of critics have said apparently when he was writing it, he was suffering from hallucinations, which were caused by a brain tumour, and he had quite severe seizures. And the hallucinations that he was having, he believed Holmes was trying to convince him to murder people too, which caused Mudgett to sort of take on some of Holmes's characteristics, such as being quite arrogant and demanding. The book sounds interesting, but they aren't sure how reliable it is, because if he was hallucinating it, he might have thought he read something that he didn't. And then in the final episode of the series, the bones were exhumed by Mudgett and a team of anthropologists from the University of Pennsylvania, and then I think they were tested in London, is what I think it was, but using skeletal analysis and facial reconstruction, they concluded that the body was in fact Holmes, America's most prolific serial killer. And this was an article that I found on NBC Chicago. So basically, I'm pretty sure they're not the same person.
Yeah.
So what did you think of H Holmes?
I thought it was very good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I would like to add that I do not think he was Jack the Ripper.
I don't. I think they're two different.
Yeah. It's just a bit of a reach.
We'll have to do Jack the Ripper because that's so interesting, so many...
I think you should do Jack the Ripper if we're doing it, because I don't love it for some reason. I don't know. I think it's just one of those ones you've heard about. So
I find it so
much.
interesting. I really
Maybe if I did some more research, I would.
Although there was actually an episode of BuzzFeed Unsolved where they looked into it, so if you are interested, I would recommend watching that, because I think it was quite a long video. Wait, that's my cat. Hang on.
I was trying to get in. Just had some scratching.
Come around. Oh wait, make sure he doesn't knock the water.
Oh yeah,
right.
Come here.
Do you want to give a little teaser for next week?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So basically, next week...
Don't give it away.
Oh, okay, should I not say the name?
No, don't say the name, just give a little teaser.
I don't know how to do this, but next week it will be my episode, and it will be another murder, and I think if I say anything else I might spoil it, so...
Oh, wow, really not giving much away.
Really not... Right, for a hint, you might have seen this person on a recent Netflix show.
Okay, that's a
hint,
pretty
hint.
good hint.
Yeah, you might know what that is. We both watch it and we might discuss it.
Well, I finished it, you haven't.
I've almost finished it.